Hi guys, welcome to Mr. Place. In this video, I'll show you how I created this stylized 2D looking art in Blender. So before I start, let me show you the whole setup. Almost everything I modeled in Blender and everything is textured in Blender. So let's get started. Before I talk about composition, let me talk about some of the references. This whole project is based on two references. The first one was to create the main house, our focus point, and the second reference was to create the background and the foreground, the forest. I used these two references and then combined them together to create this project. And for the composition itself, I took some of the hints from the first reference. I wanted the main house to be in the focus, but rather than head-on, I used the 3/4 view and my camera angle slightly looking up. I also opted for a taller aspect ratio, so I'm using 1080 by 1920 rather than the squarish as the reference image. Now let's talk about modeling. Let's start with the main house. For the main house, I wanted to keep it a bit stylized, a bit irregular, a bit unusual looking as the reference itself. So I used my cubes to create the basic form of the house, and then I keep pulling the vertices here and there to keep it that unusual irregular shape. And then I followed the same process when I was creating the roof also. I used the cubes and I laid down on the roof side, and I kept pulling the vertices so I can give them this irregular shape so they wouldn't have this uniform looking shape when looking from the camera angle. Next, I created all the windows and doors using more cubes, and then finally I created the base of the whole house and used some long cubes to create those support legs and just rotated them in every direction to have that funky looking style keep going on. Then I focused on creating the background. For this, I followed the second reference, the forest image, and then I started creating all the trees first. I used the cylinder for all my trees. I gave them the generic shape of the tree, and then I just positioned them based on the reference image itself. So I would have some trees as a foreground, some in the background, and then rest all of them in the background. Once I was done placing all these cylinders, I create few more cylinders to give them some kind of branches so we can give them some little details of the tree itself. Once I was done with creating the branches, I tried to give more details to the main shape of the tree itself. I gave all the trees that are important to the composition few more geometry by creating loop cuts, and then I used displacement modifier and subdivision surface to give them very unique tree kind of shape. There isn't any particular shape or settings that I know. I kept playing around with all the displacement settings and different type of settings to see which one suits best, and these are the settings that I finally decided on. I also created some roots for the trees so they would look much more complete and I wouldn't see any cylinder ending on the surface itself. For the roots, I just use a cylinder and just keep shaping it around so it looks much more like a irregular root coming out of the tree. And that way all my trees were done. Next was the foreground. As looking at the reference image, most of the foreground is covered with plants. So I tried using all the plants that I had in my inventory. Most of my plants are free assets. I will link all the assets that I'm using. You also can get it for free to use for your own projects. But I just pick some variety of different plants that I can use and then just put them all in the foreground. I started placing ferns in the front to get a general shape of the foreground, and once I was okay with it, I started placing all the rest of the plants to mix the types of foliage is in the foreground, so you won't have just one kind of plants in the front. Once I was done with the foreground, I also added some grass in the ground. For the grass, I also found the method in the YouTube itself. I will also link it below. It created the stylized looking grass which matched the aesthetic of the overall project. Once I was done with the grass, I also created some ivy using the Blender add-on at the base of the house. Through this, I was able to link my house to the rest of the scene. And with this, I was done with all my modeling. Let's move on to the texture. Texturing is one of the main things that actually gives the whole project the 2D look. In the 2D look, there are two more important things that we have to do. One is a shell shader, which gives it the color scheme, and second is the outline, which we always see in these hand-drawn animations. For my project, I'm using cell shader for every single thing. From my main house to the trees to the foliage, everyone is using the cell shader. The only difference is the color itself. So I started with the color scheme. So in this project, I'm using the greenish hue for all the background. So they will be green, bluish, yellowish for all the trees and the grass. And for the main house, it will be the reddish hue. So it will be either reddish, orangish, pinkish, or maybe yellowish. For the trees, I started putting the cell shader down, which is principal shader, shader to RGB, and then the color ramp. Once I was done with it, I started picking the color itself. For this particular artwork, I want my foreground to be the darkest, and as we are moving back towards the background, it will be the lightest. So the value will be lowest in the foreground and highest in the background, and it will be opposite for the saturation. The foreground will be more saturated and the background will be the least saturated. That way we can have these deep dark greenish colors in the foreground and much more faded colors when we go at the background. Another thing I did for the trees also is to create some kind of variation. I used the noise texture and then run it through a color ramp to create these spots, and then I just used this as a mask and created a color difference based on my base color. I also used this bark texture that I got it from the PolyHaven, and using it I also created another mask, and then I just did the same thing again. I used my base texture to create certain variation for the color. That way I was able to create certain kind of variations rather than keeping it just flat colors. I did something similar for my main house also. On top of the flat color that I selected, I created two more masks for the variations. The first one I used the noise texture and I run it through the Voronoi texture, so it will create this worn out kind of a mask. And then another one I just used the Voronoi texture and then I just pull one of the coordinates so I can get these lines out of it. Then I used these two textures to create certain variations from the main base color. Once I was done with this, I used the same texture, same way of creating this variation for every single thing in the house itself. So everything involved in the house, from the windows, the planks, the base, the staircase, everything is using these two masks for the variation. And this way I was done with my texturing. Now let's focus on the outline. There is two steps to the outline. One is the texture, another one is the geometry nodes. For the texture, it's quite simple. All you have to do is just create RGB color and then attach it to the output. You can choose whatever color you want for the outlines. I have selected slightly dark grayish color, not going all the way to the black. And then what you have to do is just turn on all these settings, so it will show up when we are using the geometry nodes. And then for the geometry nodes, all you have to do is set position, scale, normal, and then flip faces, set material, and then the join geometry. In the set material, we are able to select the outline material that we have just created, and then the scale value will be the value of our thickness. We can just use the scale value to adjust how thick we want the outlines to be. This one you can just go according to what you feel is right for your artwork. That was all from the texturing part also. After this, I created few more environmental stuff just to give a bit more contrast to the whole artwork. I created two fogs, one for the background and another one to focus on the main object. I just used the principal volume, gave them a slight amount of density and the emission, and then just use the color whichever suits the best. For the background, I choose something that blends with the background, so something greenish color, and for the main object I use something that matches the highlight itself, so something in the yellowish hue. Other than the fog, I also created some dust particles. For dust particles, I just used the image texture of the dust particles and then used the emission shader to give the particles a bit more strength. And with this, I was done with my artwork. Now let's talk about compositing. Usually my compositing is more or less same for every single artwork. It starts with creating a little bit of lens distortion, then creating contrast using the RGB curves and Gaussian filter, followed by some box sharpening, finally ending it with the bloom effect. And let me show you the difference between before and after. there's a bit more contrast, and now the main object is standing out a bit more because of the extra blue. And here it is. This is all I've done for my artwork. I hope you can take something out of it and put it into your own project. If you like to create this, you can also just create this. And if you like to know more about this project, I have created day-by-day progress videos. You can watch that and see how the whole project came about from just the first reference image. And if not, thank you for watching. Please share and subscribe. Also, please join me in Instagram. I do post all the other projects over there. And if nothing, I'll see you again. Thank you and bye-bye.